Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Chris Peets here today with former Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley. It's always a pleasure to be with him. Thankful for this time I'm getting to spend with him. Mr. Baxley, how are you? And thanks for this conversation.
Well, thank you. It's always good to see you. Looking forward to it.
Great. Well, I've asked you some of these questions before, but I've never had them on tape. And, I wanted to go back to when you was first got into politics. I mean, how did a district attorney from, Houston County, how did he upset an incumbent?
Well, a lot of people have wondered about that. I think a lot of it was just being at the right place at the right time, and had a lot of things came together, and I had a lot of good help. I ran against an incumbent that had been Attorney General for 2 terms, and in fact, the election before I ran, he had set the record for the most votes received of anybody 4 years before. That would have been in '66.
So that took a lot of guts to take on somebody like that then.
Well, I felt like I had a good shot, and it worked out.
Well, let me ask you, did running for Attorney General, were you motivated any of that by prosecuting the Chambliss and the 16th Street Baptist Church bombers, or did that come along as you went through your career as Attorney General?
Well, that came later, of course, but I had that in mind, that if I got elected, I wanted to do that, but I didn't tell anybody. If I'd have
you've probably
made it clear that I wanted to do that, I never would have got elected.
Yeah, it's, I hate to interrupt, but I heard during this, when Senator Jones got elected, some guy said, well, I'm not voting for him because he prosecuted Blanton and Sherry, and I'm sitting there thinking, what? How could you be thinking something like that? 2000 and whatever year it was. So I would ask you about that case now, because I've studied, I've read a lot about it, a good bit. What led you to Chambliss? I mean,
well, that's a good question, and we started out going after some dead ends that wasn't Chambliss, and our first suspect was a guy you might have heard of in Georgia named J.B. Stoner.
He was actually in prison with Mr. Chambliss, I believe. They shared the same cell.
That's right. I don't know if they were in the same cell now.
They were, because he was writing letters back home.
But I know part of the time Chambliss was in the cell with a guy named Hugh Otis Bynum from Scottsboro.
Now, was that the black kid that he helped write letters with?
Yeah, I think so. So. No, Hugh Otis was white.
Well, I read that there was a kid that was mentally handicapped that Chambliss tried to help him.
I heard read. That. I don't know anything about that.
And I just kind of wondered, I didn't know if maybe somewhere in his heart he felt amends, or how much truth it was. But I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead and tell me.
He never showed any remorse that I know of.
Right.
Chambliss didn't. We started out after J.B. Stoner, and we had a tip that he had done it, and sure enough, he and his group were in Birmingham that day of the bomb. But and they did do a bunch of bombings all over the southeast. They did a bunch of temples, Jewish temples. Did one in Charlotte, did one in Jacksonville, did one in Miami, did the one in Atlanta, did one in Nashville. And so we got a tip that they had done that, and we spent quite a few months on Chambliss, and turned out he had done a lot of bad things and a lot of bombings, but he didn't do the church bombing where the little girls were killed. But it wasn't a waste of time because we did find out that he had set a bomb off back in '57 at Shuttlesworth Church. And so we made a case on that, and that's what we convicted him of. So that wasn't a waste of time. We also got a tip that the Klan in Montgomery had done it, and we spent some time on that. And I should have had enough sense to know that Klan in Birmingham didn't need any help from another Klan. They had plenty of mean folks that could do the work themselves, but that wasn't a waste of time either, because we, even though we found out our information was bad and they didn't do the church bombing, we found another crime that they had committed where they made a Winn-Dixie truck driver jump off a bridge, and we convicted some of them of that.
God.
But then we got on Chambliss, and when we got into it, we got more and more convinced that we were on the right track, and it was Chambliss's group that had done it. And we also found out that the FBI had been on Chambliss from within almost minutes after it happened.
Do you think the FBI just ignored it, or they
No, they worked hard. Those agents worked. I've never seen a case more thoroughly worked than what the FBI did on that.
Do you think they just could have got a conviction in Birmingham in '63 with that?
They didn't think that an all-white jury would convict him.
That would have been very tough, I believe.
Yeah, it would have been. You had cases where some of these juries in the South back then were they were turning folks loose that signed confessions.
Well, I remember I was reading something about it, and there was two guys, and they killed two young black kids, and 15 minutes after they was acquitted, both of them said, "Yeah, we killed them." And I thought, wow. So the one thing about that case that's always kind of caught me as what was it? I think his name was Floyd Garrett. Was a police officer. What did he stopped by Chambliss's house that morning for a shotgun? I believe. I mean,
he was Chambliss's nephew, I believe.
Yeah. What did I say? Son? I said, yeah.
Yeah.
And I never knew why he was stopping by there, because it looked like a police officer would have his own shotgun or firearm, and then why he needed to stop by Chambliss's house.
I knew allegedly the reason he did, or the one he gave, but I can't remember now what it was. But he was a witness for Chambliss in the trial.
Well, I was talking to another attorney the other day, and he said he couldn't remember it. But I brought up something, and I asked, I said, wasn't there some wet dynamite or some dynamite that was found a few weeks before the bombing or a few weeks after? And he said, no, that was years before. And it could have been, I just got it mistaken. But I thought there was some dynamite that was found there, as well as in the house when Chambliss went crazy about them entering one of the rooms.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You know, because he told me, he said, and I didn't want to get argumentative because he was very nice to have me on there, but he said, no, that was years before, and you're getting your cases crossed, and I just let it go at that. But I had sworn that they had found that, if my memory calls me, that they had found dynamite and had actually arrested Chambliss for this dynamite and then released him.
That was found out in a field, I believe.
A field, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, that's exactly what
that was not at the same time.
Okay.
There was some more that they found, or they didn't find it, but I think a woman testified she walked in the wrong room that was in his house.
And he went.
But I think there were two separate incidents.
Now, was it the, I'm not really sure how to define the transgender or the man or the lady. didn't that person say that make two statements that Chambliss said after Sunday they'll beg us to segregate, and then he was just saying after it happened nobody was supposed to die.
That was his niece at the time that testified to that. That's not the lady that testified about seeing the dynamite over there. That's two separate people.
Right. But that woman but that was the same woman who testified about seeing hearing Chambliss say that.
The niece was the one that testified that Chambliss, and she was at that time a minister.
Yeah, I'd read that she was a minister, and then now was she a niece and then became a man, or
yeah?
Okay,
the niece became a nephew.
Okay, okay. Now, that case, I'm going to ask you a tough question. So, I mean, I'm sitting on a jury, and you're putting the case for me. You know, I've seen the 4 dead girls. You know, they're testifying, they're showing the rocks and stuff and that out there. Got I think a bob cord or a bob line was used to detonate it. I could be wrong. So I remember I don't remember there wasn't a lot of forensics, I believe, as far as the bombing. And you know a lot more than I do.
I'm not really understanding what you're asking.
The bomb. How did the bomb go off first?
Nobody ever knew for sure.
Okay, because I've heard
they had some kind of a water dripping in a float.
That's what they was talking about. All right, now there was, if I recall, there was another witness that testified, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, if Birmingham had streetlights then, but she said she was from Detroit, I believe, and she identified Chambliss from a distance.
Yes, that was Miss Glenn. She was from Detroit. She was visiting in Birmingham and staying at a house right behind the church.
Okay, right behind the church.
And she came home late that night and saw Blanton's car. It was parked in the back, in the alley, right behind the church, right by those stairs they left the bomb under. And she identified, they showed pictures, and she positively identified Chambliss as being the one in the front passenger seat of Blanton's car. Also, she wrote down the tag number of Blanton's car.
That's right. I remember reading that now. I remember reading it, that she wrote down the tag number of the car. Now, I'm trying to remember if there was any more evidence she presented in that case. I used to have notes of this stuff down. I mean, I followed it. So, I mean, and I remember when John Robbins is actually going to talk with me. He was telling me, he talks about a car that had circled the church a few times before the bombing happened. So I guess what I say is, so if, I'm on a jury and you presented that evidence to me. Was you nervous about a hung jury, or?
Oh yeah, I was nervous about an acquittal.
I mean, because that's what I mean. No offense to your case, but that's a highly. If I'm sitting on that case, I'm thinking hard about
I was very, very concerned that we ended up. We just had a good jury.
I mean, and it's I guess sometimes it works out that way because when I first read, even when I looked at Blanton and Sherry's case, and that's when I really got into all of them, and I said, the cases were really not overwhelmingly strong. they had some good juries on them, and I remember that there was one guy that rode around with them, but I bet you was sweating bullets, because I think I remember the initial vote was 11-1, I believe. I read to acquit or to convict Chambliss.
I don't know anything about that.
I'd read that in just one of the magazines. So you get out of that right there. I mean, you just it obviously it didn't heal everything that happened in Birmingham, but it helped. I guess I don't know if closure is the right word, or it helped the city a lot. Being able to bring that man to justice, and knowing that he could never harm another child again. So now comes the 1978 governor's race. Now, who was the perceived front runner? Was it Brewer? Since he'd been the front runner?
Yeah, everybody thought Brewer was going to win.
Okay.
Overwhelmingly, and it was 14, I believe it was, running.
14 candidates, really?
Yeah, and it was all in the Democratic primary.
Right.
And because back then, whoever won the primary was going to be the governor. And there were 5 what I consider major candidates. And that was
3 Bs, Fobb, and Sid.
Brewer, yeah, that's it. Brewer, Beasley, me, Baxley, and Sid McDonald and Fobb James.
Well, when you mentioned Brewer, or excuse me, Beasley, did you really take him that serious? Because, and I know I asked you this other down the phone, but I'd like you to tell me again. How did he almost get upset by Charles Woods as a sitting lieutenant governor? I mean,
well, Jerry had run a really good campaign to get elected lieutenant governor, and he beat some strong candidates, and he was unknown, about like I was. But he beat in the run. He got in the runoff. There was a bunch of folks running, and he got in the runoff with Hugh Morrow from Birmingham, who was state senator.
I remember that name, but I don't remember much about him.
Tom Radney was in that race from Ellick City. They had a bunch of folks in that race, good candidates in that race, and Jerry ran a great campaign and got elected. But then he got crossways with Governor Wallace.
Probably wasn't a smart move.
And so that, I think that what he, and the press got on him pretty bad too. Especially the Montgomery Advertiser. And they stayed after him. And so that's why Charles Woods almost beat him, I think, in 74.
So when you went into 78, and they thought Brewer was going to win hands down, and I guess I could see that, because after that race he had against Wallace, they caught it was a great book. If you ever get a chance to read it, the 25 dirtiest races in American political history. They said that basically, Brewer came in there with a message and ideas he wanted to do, and Wallace just made it his race and dirty and as low down as he could get it, and obviously it won for him. But so you said you took Beasley seriously. I read that, and we talked about this, that, and I remember you called his name, but he was like James Carville then, I think lived in Tennessee. And they said Fobb went to him 3 times and asked him to run his campaign. And he told Fobb no 3 times. And the 4th time, Fobb went and threw a whole lot of money at him. And he said, okay. He said, I'm going to take this campaign. He said, but you do exactly what I tell you to do and how I tell you to do it. And don't ask questions. And Fobb said, okay. And he got in the race. Now, I remember because I asked you this. When did you make the statement that Fobb would be a good governor if he was a serious candidate?
I can't remember what point in the campaign I made the statement, but I did say that Fobb and Sid would be good governors.
Well,
but that was fairly early in the campaign. I didn't say that about Brewer or Beasley.
well, that's what my next question was. Is because I wasn't always a member of the campaign, but from what I've read, the three of y'all took the gloves off. It was y'all were going at it, battling each other. And I don't know if you remember how dirty it got or how mean spirited it got. But of course, this didn't go anything like how I remember your '86 race was. But they said this was a pretty no holds barred between the three of y'all.
I never did think that Brewer was as strong a candidate as everybody seemed to think, and that Brewer thought. I think that Brewer greatly overestimated his. I think that he miscalculated because he almost beat George Wallace 4 years before, or 8 years before.
In 70.
8 and 70, yeah. And I think where he miscalculated is he thought all those people were voting for him. And they weren't, in my opinion. They were voting against George Wallace. They'd have voted for whoever it was that was on the ballot was a serious candidate against Wallace.
Well, George Wallace coined that statement that people are more apt to, I don't know if he actually coined it, but I know he said a lot, people are more apt to vote against somebody than they are to go vote for them.
Yeah, Wallace wasn't the first one that ever said that. That'd been around a while, but that's true. I agree with that. And there was a lot of people that were voting against Wallace, and so Brewer thought they were all voting for him, and I didn't think that. And it turned out I think I was more right than he was.
Well, the paper I read, this was a great article I read, by the way, because since I've been injured and I haven't been able to work, I've just basically put my time in politics again and studied everything I can. They said that the as y'all three was battling out that 4 days, 5 days, whatever, before the election, they released the first poll and the whole state was shocked to see Fobb in the lead, and people still wasn't believing it and just ignored it. And then election day, Fobb pulls off this unbelievable victory over the three guys. Did you still see it as Fobb was, this ain't gonna happen, this guy's not gonna win? Or did you start taking him serious at that point?
I saw Fobb coming on earlier. He had money, first of all.
Yeah.
He had more money than anybody else.
Was he spending, that's what I was fixing to say, was he spending his own money?
Yeah, he was spending his own money. And he had it to spend. And then that guy, you mentioned that he had, DeLoach Walker, and he was from Memphis. And he had these great ads, and he had Fobb riding around in a yellow school bus. And Fobb ran all over the state in that yellow school bus and had these ads that tied in with that. And
reading, writing, arithmetic.
It was just a brilliant campaign. And I saw it working. And
what did you focus on then? You said Beasley was focused, or Brewer was focusing on, the Wallace's. What was your
I was
message?
focused mostly on jumping on Brewer.
Okay, so your thing was you're just gonna take all right.
Yeah, and I was a little bit on Beasley, but I slacked off on Beasley towards the last because I thought that he just wasn't going.
So if you had to go over it again, would you have went after Fobb the whole time?
No, I don't think you could. I think it was just Bob's year.
And I mean, and the thing about Fob, and I still see people say stuff about it, and in my opinion, always bad in this when I've heard him talk and stuff. It's hard for me not to like the guy.
Oh, you can't not like him.
I mean,
I like Fob. I'm crazy about him.
I mean, Bob's just funny. You know, when he gets up there speaking, and when the reason I asked that about you said about him being a good governor, I don't know if you recall it, but in '98, Winton Blunt had challenged him in the primary. And this commercial comes on, and it shows the Alabama flag hanging in the background, and it shows Blunt, and you can hear him talking, and he goes, "I think it's fair to say when his team came into office, they found state government in shambles. They have created major windfalls in education in this last legislative session. He has passed major reforms to our court. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the governor of the great state of Alabama, Governor Fob James." And at the end of the commercial, Fob smiles and says, "Why, thank you, Winton. I am deeply honored by your kind words." And that was one of the greatest ads I've ever seen ran.
You know, Fob was able to get, he didn't have any negatives. He was able to get away with things that, when he was running that race you're talking about against Winton, Winton was kind of heavy, a little overweight, and so Fob never did call him Winton, he called him Winton.
Well, if you remember else what happened to, Fob had been down there at the school board and dancing like a monkey, and Winton said, he said, we got the governor down there dancing like a monkey, and Fob said, well, if I'm a monkey, then he's a fat monkey. I'm an in-shape monkey, so he's just a fat monkey. And then they had him on, so he passed some kind of prayer bill, and he said something about this ain't worth the papers. This paper ain't worth toilet paper. But that brought up a question about Fob. I'm not enough to remember Fob's first administration, but I can remember his second administration. And his second administration went almost back to Old South. I mean, he declared federal law null and void in the state. When Judge Moore had the Ten Commandments order to take down, he said if they do it, they'll be staring down the barrel of M16s. I mean, what was the difference between his first and second, or what happened to it? He just decided to go off the edge there? Because that seems like total.
I think Fob was pretty consistent. I think he always felt like.
Well, in his first time, did he run as a states' rights? Because it was a time for a new beginning, and he
didn't dwell on that. No, he just ran. That first time he ran, it was those little ads that didn't just made him look like what he was, a good old boy.
Yeah, that's about explains it.
Yeah.
So now we talked about this the other day. 82, you're ready to run for governor again. After Fob says he's not going to do it. But then George Wallace decides he's going to make one more run. And you think you could have beaten Wallace?
Yeah, I think that I would have beat Wallace that year. I think absolutely, no question in my mind that I would have beat him in that year.
Well, let me ask you something, Mr. Baxley. This is a two-part question. Because I don't know what it broke down to with the black vote with Fob, but if Fob got a lot of black votes, I mean, you don't think Wallace would have been able to cut into that like he did in those black belt counties against McMillan? Because now, if I'm wrong,
what year are you talking about now?
Well, what I'm talking about is when Fob ran in 1978. and I think the vote total, I think the vote total runoff was 296 to 210 or something like that. I could be totally wrong, but what I'm talking about is in 78, Fob obviously got some black votes. So don't you think you should have gotten 98% of the black vote then, since you just come off that church bombing trial?
Fob didn't get many black votes. He got more than Brewer did, and Beasley got more than Brewer did.
But I mean, just in the runoff, in the runoff between you and Fob.
I think I got 90 plus percent.
90 plus percent.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know.
Now in '82, when Wallace ran, it was the main three running in the primary were Wallace, George McMillan, and Joe McCorkadale.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a runoff between Wallace and McMillan.
Yes.
And McMillan, Wallace got probably 30%.
The vote, what I say, the paper I seen, and you can tell me if this story's wrong, is they said that Wallace, in the runoff, he went down to the black belt, and that's where he spent his time campaigning. And that election night, they had declared McMillan the winner, and then like 11 o'clock, these votes started changing, and those black belt counties started reporting, and Millen's lead evaporated. Instead of Millen getting 90%, he got like 70% of the vote, and that's what cost him the race.
That's why I thought when I answered earlier that I would have won. Governor Wallace would not have gotten the black vote he got against me.
Right.
And he got a pretty good percent of the black vote.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing the amount he got.
Yeah, against McMillan.
Do you think if it would have just been, if McCordle hadn't been in it, it had been a one-on-one race, McMillan would have beat Wallace straight up in the primary?
But what now?
If it would have just been Wallace and McMillan in the primary and McCordle wouldn't win it, he would have beaten Wallace?
I don't know about that.
When Wallace went down there, and he apologized in next church, and he got back in that race in '82. Do you remember? Everybody said that the polls showed McMillan leading him, even going into the runoff. Do you recall that, or?
I don't remember seeing anything about polls back then.
And that reminded me of something else, Stacey, too, about '78. Did you remember seeing like where you were standing in '78 and those final polls going in?
Yeah, the polls I saw showed Brewer winning.
They had Brewer winning the race. Where was you standing
I
at?
was like third.
Was you behind Fob or Gier?
Jerry.
Really? And Beasley only got like 8% of the vote.
The first poll I saw showed Brewer at 40%. Jerry had 17%, and I had 14%. And Fob had an asterisk saying not even 1%.
It's funny how things like those change. I remember in 2006, I had went to a Republican meeting and to hear George Jr. speak, and they had a poll listed, and I think that Mo Brooks was up there in it, and George Jr. was 65% of the vote, and I think Mo Brooks had like 3%, and they had the same thing, an asterisk beside Luther Strange's name, and he ended up beating George Jr. for that race. So, I mean, I guess you can't ever tell. So, let's get to the one that, of course, I mean, I followed Reagan and Mondale, but, well, the first memory I ever have of politics is I was just right before my 6th birthday, and I can remember up there in Blount County, the line is long is out there, to those trees of white blue collar workers, and I can remember my daddy holding me up to turn the lever for Wallace, and that really got me involved in politics. And then of course, I loved Reagan when I was like 7 years old. So then the '86 race, and that's when I really got into it. I still remember the first commercial I seen of you, and I don't know what it was, but I was like, man, I like that guy. I like that guy. And I was pulling hard, the whole time. And my daddy used to go to the store every day, and back then Birmingham News was a quarter, and he would buy me a paper, and I would sit there and I would read every word about that election that was going on. I mean, I can tell you everything that went on. I mean, he let me read it. Now, we had a very divided family because my first cousin, Nancy Conn, who was raped and left for dead, Charlie Graddick prosecuted that case. And so half the family was divided for Graddick, and half the family was divided for Bat. I mean, it was a war, and I can remember that race. I remember reading this thing in a poll that said that you led in the polls usually around 7-8%, and then Graddick would get really, really dirty, and he'd get within 5, but he could never get above 5% against you in that race. And before I get there, the first question I want to ask: in the primary, you got 36%. Graddick got 29%. I think Fobb got like 23%. Did the race in the primary show you winning the race over Graddick, or did it show it closer than that?
Well, my gut feeling going in was I wanted to be in the runoff with Fobb.
Why?
I felt like that Fobb was going to get about all the votes he was going to get the first time. But I thought he'd get enough to where I'd lead the ticket, but I'd be in a runoff with Fobb. And then when Graddick started coming on, and I noticed that I thought he ran some pretty bad ads against Fobb. He was trying to get in the runoff with
I
me.
seen him, so he runs talking about comparing Fobb to a frog, and
He said Graddick had an ad, it was a good ad.
oh yeah, it was fabulous.
Had an old ugly frog jumping around on lily pads and croaking.
Yeah.
And said being called called something by Fobb, being called a liar by Fobb is like being called ugly by a frog.
I remember seeing that. Well, why is it? Why do you think Fobb was only going to get? Did he lose all his popularity from the first time, or I mean?
He had.
I mean, because he made him make a great comeback, 8 years later.
I think Fobb had worn a little thin on the voters by then. And,
when did Graddick start coming on? I mean, did the first poll show you and Fobb, or you and McMillan, or where was McMillan standing at in this?
McMillan made the same mistake Brewer made. He assumed that people that were voting for him when he almost beat Wallace were voting for McMillan. And they weren't. They were voting against George Wallace.
Okay, so, but then first Fobb was leading, or Fobb was with you, is the first two, or you was leading Fobb, and then
I was
Graddick?
always leading.
And then Fobb was second.
Fobb was second, but Graddick started gaining on him.
Okay, I can cut these right here. Stop it. I got a question for you that I've always wondered because did rumors of McMillan's personal life start to come out then?
I don't remember when they first started, but I never would allow anybody to say anything about it, and won't now.
Well, I mean, I think that's an honorable thing for you. I had heard somebody had said that some kind of whisper campaign started about, and I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, I've known George McMillan 20-something years. I call and talk to him occasionally. I think
he's a good person. He's got a good family.
I think he's a fantastic man. He's helped me out tremendously. But somebody told me that this whisper campaign started happening, and I didn't know anything about that, so I just wondered if maybe that had hurt McMillan. And by the way, he said the other day when I was telling him about it, I said, I'm so excited when said Bill Baxley, and he said, make sure you tell Bill I said hello. I think a lot of Bill.
He's a good person. He's got a really good family. His wife's a wonderful lady. His son, one of the best chefs.
That man can cook. Now he had a great ad because I've got a flyer that said we don't have 4 years to waste, and he ran against Wallace in '82. So, all right, see, election night, and I can remember I was so excited because you had the lead, good lead over him, and I asked my dad, I was like, well, when are they gonna do the runoff? And he goes, well, it's gonna be 3 weeks, son. Well, 3 weeks to an 8-year-old, you're thinking you're gonna be 25 years old. So that I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh God. So then I start reading, and I see where Graddick starts getting personal with your life, and the thing gets dirty. I mean, I've told somebody that I thought that myself personally was one of the dirtiest races that I've seen, and I've always, and don't take the wrong way, I've always thought politics is a cutthroat sport. If you're going to play to win, you got to play to win. I sat in a debate with you and him, and I don't know if it was that, if he said that in the debate or later, but is it true that Charlie Graddick challenged you to a fist fight?
No.
Okay. I read that in the paper, and it just, or I read that in an article, and it just struck me as hard, and I thought, I just can't see the Attorney General challenging the Lieutenant Governor to a fist fight.
Not even a remote grain of truth to that.
Okay, because I thought that was so silly. So, and in these polls going in there, it said you always led. Did Graddick ever, did he ever lead you in a poll going into the runoff?
No.
Now, when did he start, because I think there was 30,000 votes that voted in the Republican primary. When did he start urging these voters to illegally cross over and vote for him?
Oh, immediately.
Immediately right after the...
yeah.
Okay.
We knew that was going to happen, too.
Did you?
Yeah. And we knew that we were going to have trouble.
Yeah. I mean, in a close race like that with 30,000 votes, that's a tough race. I read that when y'all, because I watched that every day that it went on, that Natalie Davis, and I don't even know, I'm surprised she estimated you got this high, but she said that out of her calculations, Graddick got 85% of the vote, and you got 15% of the Republican vote. And I guess that's possible, but I just thought that seemed a little bit high, especially with Graddick being a conservative and you being more of a moderate liberal type candidate. I just didn't see the Republicans voting that way. I mean, do you remember her testifying to that?
Generally, yeah. I didn't remember the specifics, but we knew. See, Braddock had been a Republican,
Right.
back when they weren't hardly any. He was
Right, in the 70s,
was
right?
DA in Mobile County as a Republican.
Yes, yes.
And he
Mm-hmm.
ran for Attorney General as a Democrat, because at that time you had to be a Democrat to win a
Yes.
statewide race.
Kind of like we've switched now.
Now it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But Braddock had good inroads in the Republican Party, because he was a Republican.
Right.
Bob had always been a Republican when he ran the first time.
Yeah. What did Bob say? Mama called or something, or something. It's almost like what Coach Bryant said. That, no. Bob said he was a born-again Democrat, I believe.
Bob was a Republican back when it wasn't popular to be a Republican.
Because he was actually on the executive committee.
Yeah.
And this was in like the early 70s. Or
One of the biggest mistakes I ever made in misjudging something was somebody, I think it might have been Tom Radney, filed an objection when Fobb qualified to run for governor in '78. Filed an objection with the Democratic committee. And so I went to my friends on the committee, which I was strong with the Democratic committee. And because I was loyalist Democrat and the majority of the state committee was loyalist. And so I went to them and said, please don't bar Fobb.
Yeah, I read that.
I said, let him run. I said, he ain't gonna get but 30 or 40,000 votes. Most all of them are gonna come off of Albert Brewer. And I thought he was gonna get the Republican-oriented business, Mountain Brook type voters. And if they didn't vote for Fobb, they'd be voting for Brewer. And so I was responsible for them, because technically, under the rules of the party, Fobb shouldn't have been allowed to run as a Democrat.
So going into election night, was you cautiously optimistic, as Reagan would say? Was you scared? Was you confident of victory? Was you nervous? Did you think Braddock's probably going to beat me? Did you? I mean, what was going through Bill Baxley's mind when the polls closed at 7 o'clock and you waited for those first
Which election are you talking about? 78 or 86?
86. I'm going to 86.
86. I felt confident that I was going to lead the ticket, but I was nervous that I was afraid that Braddock could very well beat Fobb for second place, and I worried about what did happen. But
after the mud, the fight, and the going at it and everything, going into that night when you knew that he begged the voters cross over.
When it turned out that my opponent was Braddock, I knew I had problems.
So at 7 o'clock that night, when the polls closed, was you nervous, optimistic, hopeful?
I thought I'd lead, and I did. I thought I'd have a fairly healthy lead, and I did. But I knew that if the runoff was with Braddock, I'd have a tough problem.
If I recall right, and I remember how they put it up that night, the votes in, they put, Braddock and Baxley, right back, they had every 30 minutes they'd show up. And I can remember, and you probably can remember the time better than me, but it was like, you led the whole night until about 9 o'clock, I guess. And I remember it being just really close the whole time, and I remember Braddock going ahead, just by a few thousand votes. And I just kept watching, and we kept waiting, and I was only 8. And finally my parents said, we can't let, you know, you're 72% in, you can't stay up the rest of the night, so.
It was close all night, neck and neck.
That's what, see, I remember that. I remember
I'll tell you a little story about a good friend of mine, from Coleman. And we've been friends since law school. He was down there in Montgomery that night at the headquarters with us. And so the Coleman County was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We were, so it ended up late that night, Coleman County went for Gradick by a couple of hundred votes out of 15, 20,000. I never voted. It was very, very close. And so I saw my friend from Coleman as we were going up to the room, and the Coleman returns were finally complete. It looked like I was trailing, and I was trailing, and I ended up losing Coleman County. And so I saw him in the elevator. I said, well, we didn't pull it out in Coleman County. I said, I'm sure sorry about that. And so the next morning, I got up early and went down to get some coffee. And my friend was pacing the lobby from Coleman. And he said, Baxley. He said, I hadn't slept all night worrying about what you said, worrying that you felt like Coleman County had let you down. And he said, but I finally figured out this morning, about an hour and a half ago, that if you had gotten, said you got 49% of the vote in Coleman County, and if you had gotten 49% of the vote of all the white boxers in Alabama, you'd have had the biggest victory that's ever been had for governor. So Coleman didn't let you down. If you'd have gotten that same percentage in every white box, you'd have been the biggest victory ever.
I knew that, Grant was not popular with the black population. I mean, I remember some of his commercials when Baxley's controlled by the liberal black caucus. He kept throwing the dog and whistle words in there, and I wonder how that went with the votes. A friend of mine, it was a teacher, and he's actually, the man's gay, but he told me that when he was, when that race was going on, he was scared to death. He said because Gradick had promised to make a witch hunt, that he was going to go after every homosexual and lesbian teacher in the state of Alabama and have them removed. And I thought, this guy's evil. I mean, maybe I'm being too harsh on him, but I mean, I didn't like him. I from the first time I've heard him talk through the whole thing, I never liked Gradick. So, what time that night did Bill Baxley know that he didn't have the votes, that Gradick was ahead?
It was late, probably. I'm gonna say after 12.
Sounds about right. Now, did you call Gradick?
I called him
Would you?
at some point, but it wasn't.
Concession.
No, I told him I wasn't ready to concede yet. I wanted to. I was thinking about filing a challenge.
Well, man, I've tried to explain that to so many people, and I don't want to say they're uneducated or whatever, but I've tried to explain it to some people. I said, Alabama, on the Democratic side, there's a closed primary state. I said, those were illegal votes that crossed over and voted for Charlie Gradick. I said, but people didn't.
We were never able to explain to the people why it was wrong and why we were right. And the explanation is so simple, but we couldn't make it, and people didn't want to.
You made the great one with the football analogy.
Well, you can't, in Alabama, we didn't have party registration.
Right.
And you could vote in either primary.
Right.
But in Alabama or nowhere else can you go in and vote for the nominees of both parties. You got to decide which one you want to vote in.
Right.
And you can't go to the Democratic convention and nominate a president for the Democrats, and then 3 weeks later go to the Republican convention and nominate the Republican nominee.
And I, even as a kid, I understood. I was like, that's illegal. They can't do that.
You can vote in either one you want to, but you can't vote in both.
And my grandfather, the first time he was born in 1930, and the first time he ever voted for Republican was for Reagan, like a lot of Southerners did back then. But he voted for Braddock in the primary, and there was no two ways about it. He tells you straight, I'm voting for Hunt. I'm voting for Hunt. And I knew so many people saying that I'm voting for Hunt. And then the next day I heard somebody say, who the hell is Guy Hunt? And I still remember the night because as I recall it, what the poll says you was going to lose. Now I found this great article that and I don't know, and I think what it was is a lot of people lie about who they're going to vote for, and I'd seen these polls that had you and him dead even going down the stretch. Now I don't know what your own internal poll said, but they had y'all like 40-40, and but you know I just felt it, and then like an hour later, you know, and my dad looked at it and said, He lost, son, and I mean that just tore me up when I found out you lost that race to Hunt, because I just couldn't.
I pretty well knew we were going to lose it. I was hoping that I could keep Braddock in as a write-in candidate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
If we had done that, I would have won, because you don't have to have a majority,
right,
in the general election. You just got to have the most votes, and I would have easily won.
Do you? And sorry, I don't keep much longer space. I'm really busy. If you had been in the reverse, and they take it away from you, would you have stayed in as a write-in? Because I don't think I could have dropped out if I felt like I won, and I think I would have had to stay in. I mean, forget Hunt.
I don't know.
I mean, I know it's a tough question for everybody to ask, but I have to say that it took a lot of, I don't know, humbleness by Braddock to drop out, because I couldn't have done it. I mean, you know that I was educated attorney general, and here's this guy that's from Holly Pond, and he's going to benefit off this right here. I just couldn't have done it. And a friend of mine told me that when they went in there that meeting, that Al Appier said, we're making a mistake. We need to have a new vote. Now, I don't know if he said that.
About filing a challenge?
No, he said when they went in there and the Supreme Court said either choose Baxley as the nominee or have a new vote. Mm-hmm. And the committee voted to choose you as the nominee. He said Lapierre told the party, the committee, he said, we're making a mistake. He said, we need to have another vote if we're going to do this.
I remember that being an issue of people batting it around.
I remember Braddock put out these things that said he had these stickers that who picks the candidate, the people, or the...
Yeah, he ate us alive on that. And the majority of the people bought it and still do it.
So, was there ever a time in that race that you ever got close to Hunt?
No.
Show the whole time. Now, and I'll only get this because I know you got a busy man, you got a busy day, and I've pegged you on this twice, but I got to do it again. I mean, 1978, so that would have been, if you won then, you've got a 44-year-old Bill Baxley, just served 2 terms as governor, and you're looking at 1988, and your candidates are Michael Dukakis, Jesse Jackson, Gore, Gary Hart. You can't tell me you wouldn't have been licking your chops looking at them knowing I can beat any one of those candidates.
I never would have run for president ever under any circumstances.
Well, tell me. Well, I've heard many people. Somebody who's near and dear attribute. I don't know if I say name because I love her to death, but she attributed this to me one time that she said if Bill didn't love women and alcohol so much, that he would have been president of the United States.
Well, I would have never run for president of the United States because it's a price that I was never willing to pay personally.
Because I thought about that one time, and I thought, because I love playing out political things in my head, I thought, what if he ran in '88 and he beat Dukakis? And this Dukakis, it's him, and you balance out the ticket, probably not with Dukakis. Him against Bush, that's a totally different race. And then if you'd won in '86, the Democratic nomination would have came down between you and Clinton. That would have been an interesting race.
Well, it would have never, ever happened under any circumstances because I just was not willing to pay the price.
Would you have ever accepted a cabinet position?
Maybe. But all I really wanted was to be governor and try to do what I felt like we needed to do for Alabama.
Now, what did you think that needs to be done? I mean, education was already bad. I mean, it's poor.
Well, it's a laundry list of stuff, but you can start with the recruitment of industry. We don't have developed automobile like we ought to. I just think there's a ton of stuff that the only person that can fix it is the governor, and he's got to know how. He or she's got to know how to get things done through the legislature, and I feel like I could do that.
I got 2 more for you, and I'll let you go because I know you're busy. And I said this on my podcast the other night that I said when 72 and Wallace was running for president, I said, not only was he winning, I said he was winning big. I said he had a 2-1 lead over McGovern in delegates. He had won 1 million more votes. I said, and if you gave me my choice of a energized George Wallace with a fired up base coming out of that convention against Richard Nixon, I said I would have taken my chances with Wallace.
Well, I tell you who else I believed that was Nixon.
I believe Nixon did too.
I think Nixon was. That's why he put all that Watergate money.
Well, I heard he put. I read because when I started studying Wallace, I was about 18 years old. I remember his last term, but I got really enthralled with him, and I started reading every book I could on him, and that's when I found out that Wallace was not the people. He was a different man than later years. But they said they put $500,000 in his campaign in 1970. And I mean, I can't imagine how much money that would be in Brewer's campaign in today's money.
I think it was a lot of money. We tracked it down, how much of it came from where and who picked it up.
Because I believe he knew that because I've said it a lot of times, I said Wallace would have beat him. The other one was a man that believes in equality and that everybody should be treated fairly and have a fair shake. How did you become such good friends and close with George Wallace?
I just always liked him, and I never minced words with him. I never told him that I supported what he was doing. He knew that I didn't believe like that, but as a person, I liked him.
Do you believe Wallace truly believed everything?
No, I do not. I don't think he did.
Ever. That's what I said on the podcast the other night. I said he never believed that, and I said I've heard him.
Wallace never believed that stuff, and I tell you, the dead giveaway and proof of that was me. When I came in office as Attorney General, within the first 2 weeks, I had the guy that I beat was the incumbent Attorney General, and he had filed all these cases in federal court aimed at blocking blacks being on juries and voting and things like that. And so I had him make a list of those cases and was going to go down and dismiss them all. And so the day before we were going to dismiss them, I thought, I owe it to the governor to tell him that I'm fixing to dismiss these cases. I ain't gonna change my mind. He can't stop me. And the Attorney General's in charge of what position the state takes in court, not the governor. But I owe it to him to tell him. And so I said, I'm gonna go tell the governor that we're dismissing these tomorrow. And man, I was sweating bullets because he'd just beat Brewer in this racist campaign. And I thought,
yes.
Here, I'm starting out the first 2 weeks in office, and I'm getting crossways with the governor, but it's this thing, it's something I got to do. So I went over to see him, got an appointment, came. I said, Governor, I just want to come as a courtesy and give you a heads up so you would hear it from me. But tomorrow we're going to dismiss all these cases that Gallion has filed trying to stop civil rights. And, I said, we're not giving up anything because we ain't going to win any of them anyway. But it's not the right thing. I'm not going to allow my office to be used in those positions. We're not taking them. And I wanted to look you in the eye and tell you what we were going to do. And so then I thought, oh, here it comes. And he said, Bill, I'm not going to try to tell you how to run your office, and I don't expect you to be telling me how to run mine, but let's talk about so. And he chatted. We never said another word. The only thing he ever said to me was after that, 2 or 3 or more times, he'd say, did you ever get any bad letters about dismissing those cases? I said, no, sir, never did. And then later on, when I hired the first black to work for the state that wasn't a janitor or a cafeteria worker, when I hired Myron Thompson.
Myron Thompson, yes.
He was an assistant attorney general. And I didn't ask Wallace permission on that. I didn't give him notice. I figured that wasn't his business. That was mine. But I reckon 2 or 3 or 4 times on that one. After that happened, he'd see me and he'd say, did you ever get any bad letters about hiring that young man? And I said, yeah, Governor, I got 2. And I said, but I got about 25 good ones.
So I've seen so many black leaders in Birmingham say, man, Wallace never believed that. Wallace was from Barber County, and once I got into it, I just I never believed it either that Wallace was behind that. So I was wondering.
Wallace did everything he could to say he was sorry that he had done it.
Well, and I pointed that out to somebody. I said when he went down to Dexter Baptist Church in 1979. He had no idea he was going to run for office again. He could have just went home and said, "To hell with it." But he went down there and sincerely apologized, and I thought that was the heartfelt.
I don't think there's any question he didn't believe it, and I think he regretted it to his dying day.
I mean, the man paid, for greatly.
Yeah.
And now, and just one more quick thing. His son, though, I seen where he would go speak before the Conservative Christian Council, and I was like, man, that's almost a white supremacist group. He did twice, and I don't know if it was what George Jr. was doing. I mean, I met him twice, and like I said, he was a nice guy, but he just wasn't his daddy. And
well, I'm very fond of all Governor Wallace's children. They're all good people. I'm crazy about them.
Well, I'm not like George Jr. I mean, I do. And so my final question is, and I watched clip after clip after clip, and I watched speech, and I would rewind it, and I would listen to the keywords. Do you think that Donald Trump ran George Wallace's campaign in 2016? Because there were so many times that I seen Wallace point up there and talk about the New York Times, point up there and say, every time you people show up, you get me 1 million more votes. There was one speech that Trump actually gave where Wallace said NATO needs to be paying for us to be spending for their money, spending for their defenses. Drain the swamp, send them a message. I think he ran the exact same campaign that George Wallace ran in 17.
Well, I don't know that I'd dignify George Wallace had a good heart. In my opinion, Donald Trump doesn't.
Okay, that's a fair statement. But as far as the campaigns were ran, do you think there were similarities between the Wallace campaign and the Trump campaign of who they were trying to play on?
I'm not even going to talk about them in the same breath.
That's fair enough, Mr. Baxley. I've kept enough of your time.
I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
If I would love to do it again sometime if you got time.
Anytime I can.
Because I mean, talking to you, I mean, I can sit here and talk to you all day long. I mean,
you know more about Alabama politics than any young man I've ever met.
Well, when you told me that when we went to that country club, that was the greatest honor that I guess anybody's ever said to me. And I wished when I was 16 or 17 years old, I was paging in the house, and I knew all of these guys. I wish that I knew somebody that or if I knew more that would have gave me some guidance. And I mean, there's no telling where that I could have did something. But I got thinking the other day. I said it's not too late, so I started writing this blog, and I started doing these interviews with these politicians, different people. And I mean, who knows? Maybe I could still. There's a guy, and I was going to ask you your advice on this right here. There's a guy. He's an entrenched candidate in Blount County. Everybody knows him. His name is David Standridge. He's been there for a lot of times. He's not been in the county in 2 years, not even to visit, not to his hometown. He's been traveling all over the world. They haven't seen him anywhere. And I was going to start going down to some of these, McDonald's where you got, a bunch of older men down there that's holding court every morning and just see what these guys say and see if I can sneak up on this guy.
I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Well, the way I figured it is, I don't have no money to really spend. It cost me $950 to join, to qualify. And Lewis told me, he goes, well, I know you'd outwork him and knock on every door in the county. He said, so you ain't got nothing to lose with it. But again, thank you so much. I mean, I enjoyed this. This is great. I love talking to you. I hated you didn't get governor because I remember I was so shocked that day when you called me, and I tell people that all the time. I said that shows the how genuine the man was, is because he could have just had a secretary stamp Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley on it. I said, but no, he's in the heat of a race, and he takes the time to call a 7-year-old kid and tells him he got his letter and thanked him for support and was going to send a limousine to come get him for his inauguration. And that shows what type of character you have as a man, Mr. Baxley, and I've always admired you for that.
Well, I enjoy talking to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry for taking up so much of
It's
your time.
okay, enjoy it. Enjoy it.
And I'll give you a call probably, as we get closer to the election season and
Okay.
get your advice on it. I'm supposed to help Robin Lydecker again. Unfortunately,